everyone, it's Caitlin. Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I make simple and delicious vegan food. So if that sounds appetizing to you, hit that little subscribe button right down there. And as always, all the recipes that I feature in this video will be linked in the description below too. But I didn't even tell you what we're talking about yet, which is Thanksgiving appetizers. Thanksgiving, in my opinion, is all about the sides. Maybe that's because I'm vegan and I don't eat turkey, but let's be real. I feel like even the people who do eat turkey, it's all about the dinner rolls, the mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole, the sweet potato casserole, all of that good stuff. And dessert if you have room in your stomach. I actually already covered the sweet potato casserole in a separate video, if you want to check that out just recently, so you can get a few bonus recipes if you click that. But today I'm showing you 7 other recipes that you can use as Thanksgiving side dishes. 6 of them are side dishes, I would say. One of them's more of a sauce, but I gotta include some gravy because we all know that gravy is just the sauce that brings all of that Thanksgiving goodness together. So without further ado, let's get on to cooking. Or at least you watching me cooking virtually. First, we'll start with our unifying golden sauce, aka my easy tahini gravy. You only need 5 ingredients for this. So to start out, we're going to add some nutritional yeast and flour to a saucepan and toast it up. I'm using brown rice flour, but I've also tried this with regular wheat flour. You could really use any flour that will thicken. Chickpea flour will work well too. So just mix this all together and you want to toast it over medium heat. And as you can see, the nutritional yeast will darken and become more golden, and it'll have like a fragrant, smoky smell to it. Then we're going to add in our remaining ingredients, which include some vegetable broth, some low sodium tamari, and last but not least, our tahini. This helps to thicken the gravy and it also adds a great nutty flavor to it. So you just add everything to a saucepan and then use a whisk and let it simmer, and this will react with the flour and also the tahini to help thicken our gravy, and it will become nice and bubbly. You can cook it for however long you'd like. Keep in mind that it will thicken slightly as it cools. So if you like a thinner gravy, you could also add more vegetable broth or even plant-based milk to thin it out more, or cook it down more if you want it to be nice and thick. I like to top mine with black pepper. I think it adds an extra nice smoky kick, but you can do you. Obviously you can serve this tahini gravy on anything, but it's particularly enjoyable on some nice mashed potatoes. Next up, we're making a roasted vegetable casserole. This is just sort of a conglomeration of all of my favorite seasonal produce. So to start out, you can add some vegetable broth or oil to a pan, and then we'll add in some onion and shallots. We're going heavy-handed with aromatics, plus some celery. So add that to a nice pot and saute that for a few minutes until everything becomes nice and translucent. And then we'll go ahead and go in with our gala apple, which we can finely dice, plus some dried cranberries, and our seasonings. We have both rosemary and thyme. Add a pinch of salt and pepper to really draw those flavors out, and then again we're going to saute this for a few minutes until the apple is nice and translucent. I like to keep the skin on my apple. You can peel it if you want, but honestly, after it roasts in the oven, I feel like you really don't notice that the skin is even there. Then at this point, we'll add in our cubed butternut squash and some Brussels sprouts, and you just want to stir to combine everything. We're going to finish this dish in the oven, which is where our squash and sprouts will get nice and tender. So really you can just transfer all this to a casserole dish. I like to spread a little bit of vegetable broth at the bottom of the pan first so nothing sticks. Then you can just pour it all in and use a spoon or a spatula to spread it out until it's nice and evenly cooked. And then once it's all spread out and smooth, you can just top it with the remaining vegetable broth. Try to distribute it evenly. This helps the veggies steam in the oven and not get too dry. And then last but not least, we'll top this all off with some roughly chopped pecans. This adds a nice buttery crunch and a nice textural component to the dish. So then we'll go ahead and pop this in the oven, and it should look a little bit something like this. Once it comes out, the pecan should still stay nice and crisp, and your veggies will be nice and tender. So then you can go ahead and serve this up. I like to use this as a sort of veggie-packed alternative to stuffing if someone is gluten-free. Obviously you make gluten-free stuffing, but it's nice to just have some roasted veggies on the side, you know, when you have a bunch of other stuff going on for Thanksgiving. Next up, we're going to be making some pumpkin cornbread muffins. I love this recipe because it can be sweet or savory. So first we'll start by making a vegan buttermilk. I'm combining some apple cider vinegar with soy milk here and then whisking it together until it's combined. Soy milk has extra protein in it, which allows it to curdle more, but you can do this with another plant-based milk too. Then now for our dry ingredients, we're going to be using a gluten-free flour blend and some cornmeal, plus some baking soda, baking powder, salt, and then optional pumpkin pie spice. If you want these muffins to just be savory, you can leave it out, but you can include it if you want them to be more of a sweet side or a more well-spiced side, but they're more just like cornbread if you leave the spices out. So whisk that together until it's well combined and then take it off to the side. And now we'll move on to our wet ingredients. We're going to combine some pumpkin puree into a bowl along with a thickened flax egg. Actually, it's 2 flax eggs. So it's 2 tablespoons of flax with 5 tablespoons of water. And then we'll add in some maple syrup for sweetness. We're using that instead of granulated sugar in this recipe. And then we'll add in our vegan buttermilk and just whisk that until it's combined. I definitely recommend using a larger bowl than I did. I had to go very slow, but we still got there in the end, as you can see. So now that you have your wet and dry ingredients mixed, obviously next up we're just going to combine them. So add your wet ingredients to the center of the dry and then mix it nice and good until you have a nice thick uniform batter without any clumps. You can see here it's even bubbling a little. That's the baking soda reacting with apple cider vinegar. Fun fact. So now you can go ahead and divide your batter evenly between your muffin tins. So once all of your muffin tins are evenly filled, we're going to pop these in the oven and bake them until they have risen and golden. Let them sit in the tray for a minute or two to cool, and then you can just carefully remove all of the muffins and place them on a cooling rack where you can let them cool completely. These muffins are really fluffy on the inside. I love enjoying them with some vegan butter. They're just so satisfying, and I love the flavor of corn, so it's a win-win-win-win-win for me. Next up, we're doing my take on a green bean casserole. This is definitely not traditional. It's more of a wholesome take, and we have a few spins on the recipe. So to start out, we're going to saute some sliced onion in water. You could do oil too, but I use this method to quickly caramelize it. So you basically cook the onion down until the pan gets brown bits on the bottom, and then we're going to deglaze it with some tamari, scrape those brown bits off of the bottom of the pan, and stir it into the onion. And as you can see, it gets nice and golden, not only from the tamari, but you also are sort of searing it to the pot when you let it cook without any liquid for a little bit. So then at this point, we're also going to add in some thinly sliced mushrooms and some garlic, and then stir those in with the onion and cook those down until the mushrooms have shrunken down and again become softer and more golden too. So now we'll add in our seasonings. We've got nutritional yeast, smoked paprika, thyme, and black pepper. Stir those into the onions, and we're going to let them toast in the heat of the pan for a minute or so before we move on to the next step. This really brings out the flavors and adds a lot more oomph to our green bean casserole. So now we're going to start to thicken this sort of soup that we're making. I'm using chickpea flour, and here I've just combined it with non-dairy milk and I'm whisking it together. The chickpea flour adds more plant-based protein to the recipe, but it also helps to thicken the mixture. You could also use brown rice flour or even cornstarch if you want. Just see the recipe notes on the blog post, which is linked below. So we're going to add this to the pot and then bring it to a simmer, and we're going to stir it up and then simmer it until the mixture is thickened enough. So it's like a thick sauce soup like consistency. This is going to be the sort of batter for our green beans. So now we're going to go in with our green beans. I like to use fresh green beans instead of canned because I like how they're crunchier in the final casserole. But if you prefer the flavor of canned green beans or a softer texture, you could totally use those too. You could also use frozen green beans. Just thaw them first and drain out the extra liquid. We're just going to mix that all until it's well combined and then transfer this into a greased casserole dish and spread it out with a spatula. The soup may want to stick to one area or another, so just make sure it's spread out to all of the corners and that all the green beans are evenly distributed. And then we're going to top our green bean casserole with some tamari almonds instead of crispy fried onions. You could totally do those if you wanted and just skip this step. Otherwise, you're just going to mix your slivered almonds with a little bit of tamari until they're well combined and then sprinkle them evenly over the entire casserole dish. So then now there's just one thing left to do, which is bake our casserole. You can pop it in the oven until it's nice and bubbly and the almonds are nice and golden. And then it's time to dig in, serve, and enjoy. I really like the flavors of this, and the almonds will add a nice crunch. And the green beans are cooked. They're not like blanched green beans, but they're still a little bit crispy. Now we're going to move on to some stuffed squash. This is my take on a stuffed acorn squash. So most stuffed squash uses like a sausage filling or some sort of meat filling, but today we're going to be using a lentil and wild rice mixture. We're going to start by cooking those together in a pan with some vegetable broth, bring it to a boil, and then cover and let it simmer for 45 minutes. I'm using French lentils because they don't get as mushy, but you can use brown lentils too. It'll just be slightly softer. Now moving on to our squash. Acorn squash is great because you can easily cut it in half, and then all that's left to do is just scoop out the seeds and it's ready to be a vessel. One extra step I like to take though is to score my squash. I just carefully sort of draw a grid on it with a knife. This allows it to cook more evenly in the oven, and then also once we final bake it with our filling, the flavor of the filling seeps into the squash a little bit more, and it's just fork tender and nutty throughout. So after you do this to all of your squash, you can transfer them to a baking dish, and first we're just going to brush or spray the tops of the squash with oil to help them cook a little bit better, and I like to sprinkle some salt on as well to help draw out some extra moisture. And here I'm just pouring some extra water into the bottom of the pan. This helps the squash cook more too. It acts as a sort of steaming liquid while they go in the oven. So we'll put those in the oven for about 40-ish minutes so they get nice and tender, and then in the meantime we can start working on our filling. We're going to warm some olive oil in a pan, and then we'll add in some shallots, and we'll saute this until it's translucent, and then we can add in some celery and some garlic plus some thyme, and saute this again until the garlic is fragrant and the thyme is fragrant too. Now going in with larger ingredients, I like to add some shiitake mushrooms and tamari. This adds a lot of umami flavor, and I cut the shiitake mushrooms into more cubes so that way they have more of a meaty texture to them too. And then we're adding some cranberries for a sweet and salty combo, and then this is the cooked rice and lentil mixture after it's done in the pot. So just add everything together, and then at this point you just want to cook it down until there's no more liquid left in the pan, and then it's time to stuff our squash. So this is what the squash looks like after the first roast, and you're just going to transfer the filling into the center of each squash, making sure to evenly divide it. And then we'll put it in the oven one more time to really make the squash nice and tender. And this also gives our topping a sort of crispy crunch, which is really delicious. And this is what it looks like. So at this point, you can remove the squash, put them on a serving tray, or just drain the liquid from your baking tray and return them to there. And then for some extra crunch and color, I like to top my squash with some pumpkin seeds and some thyme leaves too. The squash is really delicious. I'll show you here when I cut it in half. I love how it's absolutely packed with flavor, and it's also a great side or main for vegans or plant-based people, or just people who want to try something different for Thanksgiving. The lentils have a good amount of protein, you got complex carbs, you got veggies, it's all good. Next up, I'm going to show you how to make my pretty simple cranberry sauce. This is a more wholesome take on it, I guess. We're not using white sugar, we're going to be using maple syrup instead, as well as playing on some natural sweetness from some oranges. So we'll start by adding fresh cranberries to a pot, and we're going to simmer them in orange juice, which adds sweetness and that orange flavor. And then obviously it's not totally sweet enough because cranberries are pretty sour, so we'll also add in some maple syrup and vanilla extract, plus a tiny pinch of salt just to bring out all the flavors. I do have optional add-ins here that you can add if you want. One of them is a cinnamon stick. You can also add some orange zest if you want an even more intense orange flavor. You can also add nutmeg. See my blog for the full instructions, but if you want it well spiced, you can add all of those things too. So we're just going to mix everything together and then bring this to a simmer. And you're just going to simmer this for a few minutes. It actually happens pretty quickly. You can already see here the cranberry skins are getting a little cracked, and then they sort of deflate and release their liquids. And you can cook this for however long you like, but you definitely want a thick sauce that looks something like this. I like my sauce to be a little more smooth and less chunky, so what I like to do is take the back of my spoon and pop the remaining cranberries to get a softer or smoother overall sauce. You could also use a potato masher, just be careful of using that with a non-stick pan. So this is what the sauce should look like once it's done. It's nice and thick, and this recipe is great on the side. It's a great sweet complement to all your savory dishes, but you could also serve this with pancakes or waffles, or even put it on toast with some vegan cream cheese or ricotta if you have leftovers. Now onto our final recipe of this video. I think this one is pretty neat. We're going to be making a no-boil vegan mac and cheese. And just wait, it is pretty nifty. I did some cool calculations and made this really, really fuss-free. So first we're going to start by making our sauce. You're going to peel a potato and chop it up, and we're also going to slice some carrots. This is like the classic vegan mac and cheese sauce combination. Potato adds creaminess, the carrots add some color, subtle sweetness, but we're going to add them uncooked to a blender with some soaked cashews and some garlic, nutritional yeast, some salt, some lemon juice for a little bit of tang and acidity, and then some non-dairy milk to help make this even creamier. I do have a nut-free sub for this on the blog, so if you can't have cashews, click the link below and you can get that as well. So then we're just going to blend this all up until you get a nice smooth and creamy sauce, it would look a little thin, and that's because we're adding this to our casserole dish with uncooked pasta. So it's like my dump and bake or no boil other pasta recipes. You just add the sauce in with a dry pasta. I perfectly calculate it so the pasta will cook in the oven, but will also leave sauce left over. And if you want your mac and cheese to be a little bit more indulgent or cheesy, you can add in some vegan cheese. I added about a cup here. I would say you could add up to 2 cups, or I mean even more if you wanted it to be super creamy. But basically you're just going to mix that until it's well combined, and then cover it, and we'll pop it in the oven to bake. Now, while that bakes in the meantime, we can go ahead and make some breadcrumbs. If you're not a fan of breadcrumbs on your mac, you can leave them out, but I like the crunchy combination. So I'm just combining some panko breadcrumbs with some salt and melted vegan butter, keeping this super simple and classic. You could use gluten-free breadcrumbs if you want. You can make your own breadcrumbs. You can also use olive oil instead, or you can leave the oil out. It'll be slightly more dry, but it will still brown. So this is what our casserole looks like after it bakes. The sauce kind of rises to the top. So what you're going to do is mix it all together using a spoon or a spatula until it's nice and evenly distributed. You can stop here if you want, or broil that for a few minutes till it gets nice and browned, or you can top it all off with your breadcrumbs and then return this to the oven and just broil it for a few minutes until they get nice and golden. And then you can serve it up, dig in, and enjoy. Obviously this is a great Thanksgiving side, but it's also just a great weeknight meal in general. So I hope you guys try this one out. Please try it out. I also have a pumpkin one that I shared on my blog a few weeks ago too. All right, friends, and there you have it. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your favorite Thanksgiving side dish is. Or you know what? Let's do top 3, because honestly, it's hard to pick. It really is hard to pick. I am a carb-loving girl at heart though, so cornbread is up there for me. I love green bean casserole. And I really love stuffing, though I don't have a traditional stuffing recipe yet on my blog. Leave a comment down below if you think I should film that. And also if you have any other recipe suggestions, I'd always love to hear them. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. As always, check out all the full recipes linked below. And if you want to hang out with me in between my YouTube videos, you can check me out on Instagram or TikTok. I post daily content on there, so you can follow along and join in on the fun. You even get some sneak peeks of recipes that haven't yet made it to YouTube, but get on Instagram first. So all the cool kids follow me, you know? I think that means none of them do. But anyways, have a wonderful day. I look forward to hopefully virtually seeing you soon, and reminder to drink some water. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.